Hello, this is Father Mark, and God bless all the pilgrims and journeyers through the wilderness as we continue through the book of Exodus. We're getting near the end here, chapter 35 and chapter 36. Kind of repetitious because, yes, earlier we had the description of how they were supposed to build this tent of meeting. Chapters 25 to 31 were God's, telling Moses how he wants this thing eventually to be built and made. And then that's on Mount Sinai. God tells him the whole plan, and now it's being built. So it's kind of just all very repetitious, but it is important. And apparently it had a sort of a literary effect that, the explanation of how to build it was given, and then you had the golden calf episode with this big sin, and then afterwards you've got this other section, which is the building of the tabernacle. So it's kind of like a frame, they say. That's a technique they use to kind of give emphasis to that golden calf thing. So the sin in the middle, is kind of the reason why the preparations were made by God and why all these new laws had to be put into place afterwards. And so it's just kind of a very central thing, this event that happened when they worshipped a golden calf. And so anyway, now it's being built, this tabernacle. And it's interesting, at the end of this section, we're going to hear, maybe tomorrow, I think we're going to see that the work is finished in chapter 39, verse 32 and verse 43. We're going to see it's very interesting that Moses kind of looks, stands back and sees that it's all been done according to God's plan, and it keeps repeating, all the work was finished, and as the Lord had commanded, so had they done, and Moses saw the work, and behold, they had done it, and Moses blessed them. And anyway, they say that those phrases are very similar to kind of God's creating the world in 6 days in the book of Genesis, that God saw that it was good and blessed them, and all the work was finished, and those kind of words. And so they say that this building of this tabernacle tent, which later became a temple with the similar dimensions when they got to Jerusalem and built a permanent one, that this thing represents creation. This thing represents, the cosmos. It's a microcosm of the universe. So basically this temple, and they say that the Holy of Holies was kind of like, or the holy place was like the land, and the courtyard was like the sea, and it was decorated with images of stars and colors. The veil was blue and purple with kind of heavenly images on it, and then there was images of, they couldn't do images of animals or people because that would have been like idolatry, but they had images of plants and grapes and things, so it was kind of like an Eden, like a new creation, a place of paradise. So this is what is being built here in these chapters that we're reading today. So now, of course, we have Catholic churches, and but everywhere, the whole of creation, when you go to the beach or to the ocean or to the mountains, we can worship God everywhere, because creation was created as a temple, and Adam was the first priest, and we're all supposed to give thanks and praise to God everywhere, but especially in churches, of course, and tabernacles and tents. But that's because the church and the tabernacle and the tent is kind of a symbol of the world. In these chapters today, we see the building of the tent or the tabernacle, and in chapter 36, verse 35, it talks about this veil of purple and blue and scarlet stuff, and that curtain divided the tent into two sections. One that only the high priest could go in once a year with the blood of the sacrifices on the Day of Atonement and pronounce the name of Yahweh inside there, and the other section, the other half, was a place where others could enter, and where you had the menorah and the bread of the presence, and And so that was a place. Later when they built the temple, it was even more drastic because behind the curtain, they were able to make it completely dark. And they say that it developed that way, that the high priest would go in there once a year. It actually, he'd be going into complete darkness, this area behind the curtain, the Holy of Holies. And it represented the fact that God is invisible and that God's presence, his seat of mercy on top of the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant box, the mercy seat, that God's presence, he's so other and so holy that, it's like complete darkness. And only on the outside of the curtain you had the candle, the menorah with the light and such. And they'd even tie a rope around the high priest's waist and kind of, just in case he had a heart attack or something and died in there, it was not allowed for anyone else to go in there, so you'd have to pull the body out. This is how extreme it became, their respect and awe in this divine presence and their desire to keep these laws. Even to this day, the Jews show their respect by staying outside the wall. The western wall of the temple is not the only wall that exists. There's this huge complex with walls all around it, but the western wall was outside of the temple closest to the Holy of Holies. And the archaeologists are not quite sure exactly where that area was, where the Holy of Holies was kept. And so therefore, Orthodox Jews will never step foot around in that area inside so they stay outside. They stay outside the whole temple wall on that western side because they don't want to go traipsing around inside the temple area because they might be stepping on the area that it's only the high priest can walk on. And so again, that awe in the presence of God. As we go to the book of Leviticus, we've gotten to chapter 25. Chapter 25, this is the biggest chapter for us right now this year because this year is the Jubilee year. And here we have, this description of this special sabbatical year. And so basically, as I've written in the bulletin and tried to explain, the Jewish people had a holy day of rest every 7 days, right? The Sabbath day every 7 days. And they had a Sabbath year every 7 years where you had to let your land rest, and they say it was good for the soil and everything. And also the foreigners could come and, pick the wild grapes and such. But no one was supposed to work for a year on the Sabbath year. And then every 7th Sabbath year, so after 49 years, you had a super Sabbath year, which was the 50th year, called the Jubilee year, when everyone was supposed to rest and everyone was supposed to go back to family, freedom, and fullness, and total. All the slaves were released, all the debts were canceled, prisoners were released. It was this special law that you read about here in chapter 25, but it was so extreme that it was hardly ever really put into practice, actually, because, bankers didn't want to really cancel any debts, and slave owners didn't really want to let go of their slaves. And so it never got really, obeyed. It was kind of ignored, this law. And so gradually the Israelites started to sort of think of the future Messiah is going to come and fix everything. And that Messiah was going to be kind of a redeemer or a savior who's going to come and redeem finally all those who had been separated from their land or their family or imprisoned or enslaved. And in verse 25 of chapter 25, there's some words about this next of kin who shall redeem. And that's a goel. It's this idea of a kinsman redeemer, like a rich uncle who could, bail you out if you were, in debt or in trouble, or kind of bring vengeance. And so the Jews started to expect that the Messiah was going to be something like that, a redeemer who was going to come and finally establish, as we heard in the Gospel of Luke, at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, he says that I have come to release the captives and set the prisoners free and to proclaim a year of favor, finally an acceptable year of the Lord. And so now in the Catholic Church, we started that tradition kind of in the Middle Ages. They began to have Jubilee years so that people could come to Rome, and they had special indulgences and blessings, and so now it's every 25 years. They've made it every 25 years instead of every 50 years, so just about everybody can, in their lifetime maybe, can enjoy it. So a pilgrimage to Rome or to your cathedral, there's instructions from the Vatican about how to get this special blessing called an indulgence for doing these kind of spiritual pilgrimages in the Jubilee year.